6:45. Much of the focus in the aftermath of the Manchester bombing has been on the government's PREVENT strategy, which aims to stop people becoming terrorists.
So PREVENT has been around for about 14 years. It's part of the government's wider counter-terrorism strategy, and it has been criticised for focusing on certain communities and perhaps alienating people in certain communities. Let's talk about this. Let's see if PREVENT is working or if it's time for a rethink. Joining us now is Zubeda Limbada, who's worked on PREVENT strategies in the West Midlands. Thanks very much for joining us on Breakfast this morning. Briefly explained what PREVENT is all about. What are the sticking points about PREVENT, and what's the proof that it's working?
So I think you're right to highlight where some of the issues around PREVENT are, which is about trust building. It's a scheme that's been in place nationally since around 2007, and there's been some success in terms of intervention, so those who are vulnerable to radicalisation being put on programmes. There's a vast number of community projects as well that are locally grounded. So there's a whole host of things in the spaces that PREVENT works. And there's also something called the PREVENT duty, which has been in place since 2015, where organisations like ourselves would work in schools, for example, in public spaces, so that we can make people aware, whether it's teachers, whether it's students, for example, around vulnerability and radicalisation. Where some of the concerns in recent days, and it's ongoing, have been expressed around PREVENT, is around the factor of trust within certain sections of the community, particularly within the Muslim community, and it is a minority in the sense that there's an element of trust that's not there with the strategy. Would they trust the authorities? So the trust is critical, but at the same time there are many people who do engage with it, and they recognise that in the absence of nothing, a scheme does need to be placed. And I think that's the first thing that the government does need to engage with, in the sense of looking and being more engaged, but also addressing some of the transparency issues as well.
How do you build that bridge between government and communities, people living daily lives, and government, which is way up there, seemingly removed from what's actually going on? You mentioned trust, and then there's also communities working together to make sure that these radicals, that these people who wish us harm, don't get their wish.
The essence of PREVENT is about addressing all forms of extremism, not just a type of extremism. So trust building needs to be not just with the government itself, with localised police forces at the local level, with people who might have concerns around far-right extremism, with Islamism. So localised relationships is important. The second thing is about making sure that we aren't reactive. So trust building takes time. It's about people sharing their concerns. For example, when we go into schools, we may have, for example, great cases of where teachers feel actually all we want is something practical, how we talk to our young people. How do we understand how online radicalisation takes place? When we talk to some students, for example, some of the negative concerns will be based on the fact that they've been told from whichever sources that they shouldn't engage with PREVENT, because if they do raise concerns, if they express a negative point of view, rightly or wrongly, because these should be safe spaces, then they will get into trouble with authorities. So there's a mixture of things that can be done, but at the essence of it all, trust building and transparency has got to be critical in this as well.
How much intelligence do you think has, or credible intelligence, has been derived through the PREVENT strategy? Amber Rudd, Home Secretary, was talking on the BBC yesterday, saying that much has, so it's worth sticking with.
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's an element of success that has to be pointed out. A lot of the things that we don't see publicly as individuals in terms of whether something has worked, because actually you're working to stop people from being radicalised. You're educating people, you're educating communities, you're educating teachers and young people. So a lot of these factors you won't see. The Channel programme that the government again has in place is about one-to-one interventions and mentoring. So people who are actually on the point of being radicalised, but actually putting into place some steps. Again, the perception is around a group and a religious group being targeted, of feeling marginalised from the process itself. So again, my point is around where the government needs to engage. It's been in place since 2007, so I think we do need to look at what is working, what isn't working, and it's not enough just to invest more money in things.
OK, thank you so much for your time this morning. Zubeda Limbada from ConnectFutures. Thanks.
Let's see, 6:50. Just a reminder, we'll be